Hello and welcome to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast. I'm your host, Pilar Orti, and this is the final episode of the three-part mini-series on how the world of work and our attitudes to work are changing. If you have just joined us for this third episode, well, the series covers different surveys that have taken place over the last couple of months, September, October 2020, and it asks, the surveys ask employees and business leaders about what has changed because of the COVID pandemic, how attitudes have changed, what might be different in the future, etc. The first episode featured Katarina Bolle-Carbonell, and she talked about a recent survey in Ireland. Our previous episode was a report covering the attitudes to a hybrid type of workplace in the UK, and our guest for that was Andrew Saunders. And in this final episode, well, I talked to Chris Mullen, Executive Director of the Workforce Institute at the Ultimate Kronos Group, and this survey looks at employee concerns around physical safety, psychological security, and job stability from a global perspective. So each interview works as a standalone episode, so I hope if you've been with us for a while that you're enjoying all three. And of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I'd love to hear if you're a regular listener, whether you like the fact that sometimes we have series about a specific theme. You can get in touch through virtualnotdistant.com. There's a contact form there. And while you're there, sign up to our newsletter with monthly reading and listening recommendations even. So I hope you enjoy this final episode in our mini-series on how the world of work and our attitudes to work are changing. Well, for today, I have Dr. Chris Mullen, who's the Executive Director of the Workforce Institute at UKG, and whose recent research includes, some work on work-life negotiation. Hello, Chris. Welcome.
Hi, Pilar. Hi. Thank you for having me.
Even before we go into the reason why I thought it'd be good for our listeners to meet you, work-life negotiation, I don't think I've come across that term before.
Yes, it's a term that I have been using with since my doctoral dissertation and my 9 years of research on the topic that started out with work-life balance. This idea or the myth to me that they have to be equal, your work and your life domains. And I came to a conclusion that they don't have to be separate, but they also don't have to be, you may have heard the other term, work-life integration. Mm-hmm. I don't believe they have to be that integrated where you can't see the boundaries. The negotiation piece is more or less depending on your season of life, even the day, that you're constantly negotiating which one is going to take priority. For instance, if I have a kid's sporting event in the afternoon that I want to attend, I'm negotiating how much work I'm going to put in prior, or am I going to start earlier so that I can attend that? And that it's not necessarily a balance. I think people get caught up in that myth that it has to be balanced, and it doesn't. My research has shown that there are folks who work more and their work-life satisfaction is, they're very satisfied. And then there are other people that work a whole lot less and they're also just as satisfied. And it depends on our own individual values at the time.
I love the term. It makes it so fluid, and that negotiation, it will vary probably between different times of life. And I love it. So a nice term. Good listeners, I hope you enjoyed that little segue early on as well. So UKG, the Ultimate Kronos Group, has recently released some research around mainly what the concerns are for people about returning to the workplace. We are recording on the 4th of November, 2020. So this is a time-sensitive episode. So I thought, Chris, even before we go into that research, if you could tell us a little bit about UKG and also what your role is within the organization.
UKG is, we merged two companies. We merged two companies during the pandemic, two huge companies. So Kronos and Ultimate Software in April of this year came together to create the world's most innovative HCM management and workforce management company. So as of October 1st of this year, the combined company now is known as UKG, or the Ultimate Kronos Group. And our, when you merge two great cultures, our tagline, I think, says it all. Our purpose is people. Mm-hmm. And my role within the organization is I'm the executive director of the Workforce Institute. at UKG. And the Workforce Institute really, it's been around for over 13 years. It provides research and education on really critical workplace issues facing organizations around the globe. And we're made up of a board of thought leaders, practitioners, and we think that positions us uniquely to empower organizations with knowledge, information, so that they can manage their workforces effectively. So essentially, we look at important workplace issues and we look at potential solutions, and we kind of try to help our businesses or any business really through these times that we're all going through, not just COVID, but the workplace in general.
Yeah, because it's gone through quite a lot of shifts, lots of challenges. I imagine that, well, it must have been a very interesting decade. Well, it's always interesting, but a very interesting decade in particular.
Oh, for sure. For sure. You're right on.
Let's have a look then at this specific piece of research, which is, I've got the summary in an article in businesswire.com, which says, physical safety, psychological security, job stability, employees worldwide share top COVID-19 concerns for the workplace of today and tomorrow. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the piece of research, who took part? Let's start with who took part in the study.
Yeah, so the survey really explores how nearly 4,000 employees and business leaders in multiple countries, not just the U.S., but like Australia, the U.K., New Zealand, Mexico, France, Germany, China, Canada, and I think I left out, and India. So there's a lot of different countries involved and a lot of employees and business leaders. So we really wanted to explore how they felt about their employer's initial response to COVID-19, and then explore the top needs and concerns of the workforce in 2021, kind of to say, hey, here's what we just went through. How was that response? And then going forward, what are the needs and concerns that are going to be coming about?
So in that response, it was however their employer had responded.
Mm-hmm, that's correct. And we have some really top level findings here. And some of the ones I want to point out is that only a fraction of employees, so it was nearly 20%, felt that their organization actually met their needs during the initial months of the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's not a lot that's 1 in 5 employees that really felt that way. So that's something that we wanted to explore. And we understand, right? I mean, for all businesses and organizations, this was new. No one had ever gone through anything like this before. One of the other top findings were that nearly a third of employees say that they trust their employer more than before the pandemic because of how they reacted. So while a lot of employees didn't feel that their organization met their needs, they also increased the trust with their employees during this time. So I think that's interesting to note.
Yeah. Do you have any hypotheses or any examples of why that might be? Or yes, any hypothesis maybe.
Yeah. So from this is just me looking at the data. So some of my personal thoughts about the survey. I believe that people want to trust the organizations they work for. I really do. I think people go into working for a company or a business organization with that type of genuine thought that they want to trust them. Now, it's possible that COVID, was a really hard nudge for organizations to put people at the center of their strategies, right? They're trying to look at their revenue. There's so many things that businesses were trying to look at, the health and safety, that maybe the employees didn't feel like they were at the center of their strategy. And even if they were, maybe companies didn't communicate that as well. We have learned from this that communication, even if as a business or a leader, you think you've told or expressed to your employees something, that you need to continue to do it. Not once is not enough. And I would even say that once you think you've done it multiple times, do it more. because we want employees to be able to hear how we care for them and that will create, I think that's where the trust comes from. And it could also explain why there was only a fraction of employees that felt organizations met their needs. They could have been having their needs met, but if it wasn't being communicated, people create their own perception of reality. And so I think communication comes out of this, to me, as one of the key ways to build trust during a pandemic or a crisis.
Did the study, I can't remember, did the study have any data or any examples around the kind of communication that employers had done, or any frequency or anything? Or actually, you didn't look at that specifically?
We didn't look at that specifically. That is something of interest to me going forward because, I think going through the pandemic has really allowed for even more trust to be built between the employer-employee relationship. That's one of the key takeaways that I'd like to express to folks. And that means even if mistakes are made, it's still an easy way to build trust. If you make a mistake as an organization or an employer, own it, communicate it, and let's try to course correct and make it right. And that's by truly putting the employee first. There's this mutual trust, I think, that is happening. And what businesses really want, I guess, is employee engagement. And that is a huge success for them and could go to new levels in my eyes.
And is there anything else that you wanted to highlight from the study?
Yeah, there are a couple more that I think are important for the listeners that they could probably hear and then be able to apply to their own organizations. That nearly half of employees globally, that was 46%, said quick notification about confirmed COVID-19 cases in the workplace is their top concern. So they want to be able to be notified if someone in their work comes down with COVID. I don't necessarily think they need to know who, but that it has happened, that there's either contact tracing or that the organization has some sort of protocol in place that should someone test positive, that they are going to inform employees and something else, and that they have a procedure to move forward. And in fact, ironically, I'm going through this right now in this minute with one of my children's school, where we were just notified 20 minutes ago that there was someone in their cohort who had tested positive, and now all the teachers are quarantining at home. So they let us know in less than, I think they learned about it yesterday afternoon and let us know about it this morning. Mm-hmm. So I think this is something that will hit home with a lot of folks, not just in business, but if you have children in education, or you have maybe a parent in adult care. There's a lot of different ways I think this can transpire.
For me, in my mind, it goes back also to your point about trust, communication, transparency. We also want to know that we're going to be told, that we're going to have the information also to be able to make certain decisions. It's super interesting.
Yeah. And if an organization does not communicate that once, the trust is eroded and it is really difficult to get back. I always like to tell companies to err on the side of caution and just over communicate. That's what your employees want. That's what they expect. And that's how the trust and the culture, a positive culture, gets built over time.
And is there anything that you saw that surprised you that maybe you weren't expecting, or also maybe, and this might be a separate question, anything about the difference between countries?
We have been we've been slicing the data via countries. I've looked at the US, I've looked at the UK. It seems that folks are in line with the global results that we've been putting out, with just some slight differences. So nothing that jumps out to me to say, oh, this is really different here than there. This survey, I think, would be different if it were given right now, just because of what Europe is currently going through, and then what the Western part of the hemisphere is also going through. We're not all in the same spot at the moment. I think with like the UK has gone under more of a lockdown till December. I think with this potential second surge that's happening, I think the results would be a little bit different. But we have seen that the one thing that across the board is that employees and employers, they want clean and healthy workplaces. That's not as important if there's not job security and flexibility. So, for me, what really jumps out is if folks are working from home, what are they doing? And this is because of my research for their work-life negotiation. There are no boundaries at the moment if you work from home between your work and your life, other than maybe a door if you have an office. A lot of people weren't equipped or prepared for working from home, nor should they have been. And companies weren't either. So, that safety and security is paramount, is what we have found in this study for employees and leaders.
And is there anything that you were expecting to see that you didn't see, or that emerged in a smaller amount, in a smaller percentage than you would have expected?
What surprised me the most is that there wasn't huge shifts in the data dependent upon the country. To me, that was surprising. That's something that I would like to dig deeper into in the future as we continue with research like this.
What can employers and employees then take from this study?
I'll reiterate, trust is important. It's up to the employer to communicate often and early to build that trust, because employees want to know that their employer has their best interests at heart, whether that's job security, whether that's safety when we come back to the office, or there are a lot of companies and organizations where folks have to be present to work. And so what does that safety and security look like? I think what they also can take away from the study, something I've been writing quite a bit about over the last month, is this idea of empathetic leadership, that employees want their employer, their leaders, managers to be empathetic and to show that. We don't know what's going on if at home for folks, right? We might know a little bit about folks' personal lives. If you're a good manager, you know quite a bit because you understand, you get to know them. But there are always things in the background that we don't know about. And so to become an empathetic leader, we need to sometimes know a little more, but other times we just need to be able to show that we care, that there's vulnerability. As a leader, you might not have all the answers. And you know what? It is okay to tell your employees, I don't have all the answers yet, but we're going to get through this together. And we're going to work on this together. So I think for me, that's some of my biggest takeaways, is that this is the chance for employees and employers to build that trust that they've never had at this level before, and to take that to the next level, because that's what will propel a business forward. If you can have your employees on board, if they know that they're cared for, they will go above and beyond for your organization. And that can translate into revenue and a better workplace culture.
Yeah, it's so interesting how the emphasis on trust has really been highlighted during this. And as you were speaking, I was also thinking there's also a craving for humanity in both seeing the humanity of our leaders or of our organization as led by humans, and also being understood as humans, where that empathy comes from.
Yes. And you know, there are a lot of businesses that can do really small things for their employees that don't cost a lot of money to kind of build that trust and that humanity. You know, for instance, you know, yesterday was a big election day here in the US. We as a company decided to say, hey, if you need the time to go vote, please go vote. Over the last few months, our CEO has said out loud, we know this is trying, and we know that everyone is working really hard, and a lot of people are working from home, and there's very blurred boundaries. If you need to go out for a walk in the middle of the day, you have my permission. If you need a nap in the middle of the day, you have my permission. If you have to take care of your families, please do that. And so I think these are some easy ways that leaders can be empathetic and show just what you said, that humanity. I think you're right on with that term. It's the humanity of the workplace now. People are not widgets. People are not commodities. They should be looked at as people and as humans that have lives, and we should care about that person holistically.
So one piece of research I would love to see in a couple of years' time is how much, I'm going to be optimistic, how much of this has transferred into the more day-to-day out of crisis mode, because I think I'm seeing and I'm feeling that that is for now, and it might get lost when it's not so obviously needed. It's always needed.
Yes.
So that's one piece of research that I would like to see. What else would you like to know, Chris, about the current workplace situation? You've already mentioned some stuff that's coming out that you've seen in this study. Is there something else from the study or something else that you're looking at?
Yeah, there are a few other things that I'd like to look at from a business perspective, from maybe even a human resource. I think this is a really good opportunity for human resources, the industry, to propel itself forward, because they've been asked during this pandemic to do so many things that I don't think businesses realized that they were able to do, or they counted on them to do, like the communications with employees over when to come to work, when not to come to work. If someone does test positive, how does that work? I think human resources has a wonderful opportunity to move themselves forward in the business. And I would like to see things like, what did HR departments or groups or leaders do during this time? What are their lessons learned? It'd be interesting to compile a study, a survey of that, and say, hey, what did you learn personally, professionally, and compile that for folks to say, here's what HR leaders around the world have seen, here's what they've learned, and kind of put out maybe some best practices. Because research can only go so far. We really have to put some of these things into practice. That's what I love about research, is you can kind of come up with these statistics and what's happening, and then how do we move it forward and put it into practice with our practitioners to benefit our employees. So that's one thing I would like to see, is what are the best practices that came out. Some of the other things going forward, to one of your points earlier, is how has trust grown over this time, and then can it stay? Can that high trust level stay if we go back to what it was before, like with our daily work? We come to work, we work, we go home. Because some of the best companies, it's about the trust and it's about their employees, and that's how they've stayed on top of this. And so some research around that I think would be wonderful. And my own personal research would be, how has this impacted someone's work-life balance, work-life negotiation? Because folks have said to me, oh, this shouldn't be a big deal for you, the quarantining, the working from home. You've already worked from home for a couple of years. And I want to say to people, that's not true. It has impacted me severely. I have 4 children. Now all of them are at home trying to go to school. The socioeconomic indifferences that come from something like that. I get emails every month from my internet provider saying I'm at my 1.2 terabytes. Because I have 5 people in a house on video all day. So, and I feel privileged that I can afford something like that, right? What about folks who can't? What about folks who can't afford computers for their children? There are some indifferences, I think, around the globe with that we need to kind of research, look at, and figure out better ways.
It's really highlighted those differences in many aspects, and the working from home and ability and comfort of working from home with sometimes children or other people in the house. That, as you say, that as either remote workers or people who used to have been working from home for a while, the context is different. This is not the remote work we were used to.
Yes.
Really interesting point. Yeah.
And what about the parents who need to be present to work? What's happening with their children? Are they home by themselves? Are they not getting meals? Like, there's so many things that this brings up if we were to do real research on this topic.
Good. Well, I hope that those conversations, again, that these conversations don't stop once the pandemic is a little bit more in hand. I'm just going to go that far. But I really hope that some of these conversations, either like some of the stuff you've mentioned at an organizational level, but even more importantly at a society level, I hope these conversations stay up in the air and looked at. So, Chris, we're going to wrap up. I would like to ask you to tell our listeners how they can find out more about your work or UKG, and also if there's anything that you would like to say as final words, then this is your chance.
Wonderful. I appreciate you having me on. Yes, you can find more about UKG at ukg.com. If you'd like to know more about my writings and my research, you can certainly follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter, Chris, CHRIS. MMULLEN. So Chris M. Mullen is my handle for both. And there's stuff that I put out on a daily basis that I think help businesses and leaders that they can put into practice. So wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Well, listeners, you heard Chris's invitation to follow him on social media if any of the stuff that he's been talking about is of interest, which I'm sure will be, because if you're listening to this show, then all of this is of interest to you. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
And listeners, that is the end of our 3-part mini-series on how the world of work and our attitudes to work are changing. I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you very much to guests Katarina Bolle-Carbonell, Andrew Saunders, and of course today's guest, Chris Mullen. We'll be back with our regular schedule with more timely episodes like these, but also some evergreen topics. So make sure you're subscribed to our show on your favorite podcast app. And honestly, if you can't find us somewhere where you find other podcasts, let us know. Not if it's BBC Sounds, because that's only for the BBC. But anywhere else, we should be there. And do let me know. You can email me, pilar@virtualnotdistant.com. And over at that URL, virtualnotdistant.com, you can find loads of resources on leading remote teams and online collaboration. And of course, we also have a description of our services, training, facilitation, especially working with managers of remote teams to make that transition. And if you've been forced into the transition and want to stay flexible, then let us know. We'd be happy to help. For now, thank you for listening. A big thank you for listening to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast produced by Virtual Not Distant. If you have something to add to the conversation, let us know through the contact form over at virtualnotdistant.com. I have been your host, Pilar Orti, and I'm signing off now. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, enjoy.